I take my shoes off at night, put them over here, put my house shoes on, and then I put my feet up here off the draft. When I went to church, I was in church every time the doors opened. And I went to First Baptist there at 8th New York. You got that on now?
Yeah.
Oh. I went to the First Baptist Church at 8th New York, and we used to have what they called sword drills. And so be a line of boys and girls. And then they'd call out a Bible verse, and whoever found it first stepped forward. And when you did, you got an award for it, winning. So I was 12 years old when I got that picture of Jesus.
Huh.
So I stuck it up here. This cross was given to my mom. We lived at 1044 York Street when Jim was born. And he was a breech birth, born at home. And this lady next door came over, I guess to help Mom, and she bought this cross. And she said, honey, you're going to need this more than I am, because she was in a lot of pain, And then that was Jim, and then Philip was born at the old Spears Hospital. But this cross must be close to 100 years old, because Jim's 75, I think, now.
Mm-hmm.
But Debbie and Philip, my youngest brother, there's 10 years difference between their age. And he died 3 or 4 years, 5 years ago. So he died on day before Debbie's birthday. And so everybody showed up down in Florida, and they had him cremated and everything. I couldn't believe that all his ashes fit in this little tube like this. But Mom was cremated, and Debbie still has her ashes in her bedroom. But this picture is my dad's dad, and he was born 1856 and died in 1919. I was born in 1929, so I didn't get to see him. And this is my dad's mother, and she was born in December 1865, and she died 1921 in Chattanooga. My family moved, and this is my mom and dad's wedding picture. And gosh, I don't know what year they were married, if it was 1 or 2 years before I was born. Dad worked for the fire department in Vicksburg, Mississippi. His parents came over from Ireland during the potato famine. The potato famine was in the 1800s. And I think they settled in Chickamauga, Georgia. Because when Mom and Dad got married, I was born in Vicksburg, and I was like 2 or 2.5 when they started going up, moving up, and they stopped to see his parents. So Michael was born in Chickamauga, Georgia. Then they came up to Maysville, Kentucky, and I have a brother that is buried up there. His name's Curtis Ronald, and he would be 2 years older than, Mike. No, 2 years younger than Mike. And then Jim was born 2 years later up in Newport. And then Philip was born 2 years later at Spears Hospital in Dayton, Kentucky. So,
What happened to the first brother?
please,
The one brother you talked about?
In Maysville.
Curtis Ronald.
Yeah, what happened to him?
He was only 5 days old when he died, and he was laid out at home. And my mom was very superstitious, and she And the little tiny casket was like this, and it was in front of the windows in the front room. And I don't know if a window was open or what, but a bird got in the house and flew right over that casket, and Mom screamed, "Oh my God, that's a sign of death in the house." And he's buried up there in Maysville, but he was already dead. But Mom was superstitious about everything. When Dad was when Ben was in the hospital, my husband, we went down to Spears to see him. This woman came in, he was in a ward, and we were sitting there talking to your grandpa. And this woman was coming down to see her husband. And he was across the corridor from Ben, Ben was in a ward, and the right side, he was on the right side, and her husband was on the left. So she comes strolling down that corridor between the two beds, and she was cross-sided, and Mom went, "Oh," like that. And I said, "What was that for?" She said, "Whenever you see a cross-eyed woman, that's bad luck. You're supposed to throw salt over your shoulder too," but I didn't have it. But she said, "God damn, right in front of that woman." And that lady lived in Cold Springs, and her husband eventually died. And so anyway, Dad came home. We traveled a lot. We traveled all over the South, like through Vicksburg and through Texas. We drove. And I remember stopping in a diner, and it was me and Mike and Jim. And so, of course, you didn't have a whole lot of money back then, but Dad worked for the government. He was an engineer. And so he was took us in for breakfast, and we all wanted pancakes. And he said, "Get one order of pancakes and split it." We said, "No, we want our own order of pancakes." Well, back then they had these little pint tins, about that big around, that you put beer in. And then anybody, a child or anybody, could go into a bar and buy beer and put it in that little can. It was a quarter or a nickel or a dime, something. It was like a pint tin. It had a little handle on it you carried. So he shoved those pancakes, what was left off of our plates, into that. And all across Texas, we were headed for San Diego. Anytime we got hungry, he said, "Eat those damn pancakes." So Mike, to this day, cannot eat a pancake, and I don't eat many, not just one or two, maybe a year or something like that. I don't know if Jim can eat them because he was so little. He probably don't remember all that. But we were in San Diego, and we were, Mom and Mike and Jim and I were standing there at the wharf. Dad was working out on what they call Maine or Mare Island, and we were watching the water and the boats all there, and this one boat came up, and he said to Mom, he said, "Would you like to take a ride around the bay?" And of course then you're superstitious about going with anybody. You're afraid, you don't know them. Turned out it was Alec Templeton, who was a famous musician then, and that was his boat. But Mom didn't go, we didn't go there. And so then right alongside of us, there was a shark somebody had caught, and it was hanging from the tail down, and he had a cardboard box underneath to catch the dripping blood. Mm-hmm. And we were seeing that thing was like from the ceiling all the way down to the floor. It was that long. But anyway, we lived out in what they call Chula Vista in California. It was outside of San Diego. And there was a famous movie star out there, rode the horse, And he didn't ride, he
Lone Ranger?
may have rode his horse with, you gonna turn it off?
No, just making sure it's recording still. Yeah, it's good. Go ahead.
I think he rode partner with the Lone Ranger. No, that was Tonto. He rode partner with somebody. He was Mexican. And I can't think of his name now. I would know it if I heard it, but I can't think of his name. And then we lived in a house in a trailer court. And we went down to Mexico one time. And my dad ordered roast beef, and they gave him chili. None of us spoke Spanish. Very few Mexicans spoke English, you know. I mean, we're talking back in the 40s. So anyway, he got chili instead of meat that he wanted. And it was just not too many miles to the border from where we lived. And then we moved back home from there. Mom was pregnant with Philip. And we moved down to Isabella Street in Newport. And let's see, then we moved up to Aunt Mildred's upstairs when Philip was born. I had a picture of Mom in the backyard. We had a big, flower bed bush, and she was pregnant with Philip. And she stooped down behind that bush so you couldn't see her stomach, you know. But anyway, she had Philip, let's see, 1950, let's see. He's 10 years younger than Debbie. Debbie was born in 52. So he was born in 42. He was born right after the war started. So, anyway, we stayed, Dad would travel back and forth. So when we finally moved up to Vine Street, up there where the new Kroger Market is now and all that stuff they created. Vine Street began to Grant.
Talk about
Yeah, and we used to sled right down that hill, real steep, you know. And one time, milk was delivered then in glass bottles, and you had a carrier. And so the milkman, we lived right at the corner, and you could come down Vine, you made a sharp turn, and went down to Grant. And so the milkman, it was so icy and snowing that day. He sat down, he scooted, he didn't sit on the ground, and he held on to his metal cart and slid down to our concrete down to our house to deliver milk. And Jim was just maybe in the first grade or something like that. Very young. In Coatbury School, you could cross the street and go down the steps and turn left, and there was a grocery in Coatbury School, which they tore down when he built that subdivision down there not too long ago. And so Jim went down to school one day, and they had, I guess, a nurse, social worker, whatever. And he told me he didn't have anything to eat in the house. Well, right away they were up there. And my mom was so mad, she started cussing. She said, "What do you mean we don't have anything to eat?" She said, she threw the pantry door open and showed her all the food. Well, it wasn't anything Jim liked. So he told her we didn't have any food in the house. But I think he got a spanking for that one.
I bet.
But from there we moved up to, we bought a house. First house we ever owned was 7th Street, Dayton. And Dad went out to Denver on a job. And he got stepped off the bus and got hit by a car. So he was out there maybe 6 months because he was home in December. And Paul was already born, but he was home in December, and then he died in January. And
Was it from
Roosevelt.
complications of getting hit by a car?
he had the beginning of TB,
Oh.
and he was in there. You know, we had a car, but none of us were allowed. We didn't go for rides or anything. We didn't go on vacations or anything like that. That was Dad's car. And we rode it a few times, but there used to be a spring out there on 27, right where the reservoir was, and it was down in the ditch, like, you know. My dad would take us out there and we'd get a bottle of spring water and bring it in and drink because he loved that water. But anyway, he died in January of 46, I think. And he died on January 10th, which is my mom's birthday. And her dad died on January 7th and buried on the 10th. And so she always said, if I make it through January, I'll make it to the rest of the year. She died in July, but not that same year.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, she went to work after that, and no job training, because when you're from Mississippi, African Americans do all the work, and they do the cooking and everything for you for a couple dollars a day, you know. And so I lived with her after Dad died with my grandma down there for a couple years, and that's where I met Ed, my first husband. And we were married at Starkville, Mississippi, up there with the college, and we were 17, 18 years old. And from there, he joined the service and went to Okinawa. And Terry was born.
Did you go to Okinawa too?
No. The wives didn't go there unless you were in the service.
Okay.
So how old were you when your dad died?
16.
16.
Yeah. And my mom, I had the 3 brothers, and my mom was so worried about, because the insurance man got her a job working up at the Beverly Hills Country Club as not a waitress but a receptionist, and then she went into waitressing. But there was always boys hanging around the house because we had 3 brothers, you know, and she was worried about me getting involved with them. Well, they would come and buy liquor, and they'd hide up the ceiling in the basement where Mom couldn't see it. And those days we had a big old coal stove down in a furnace, and in the front part of the basement was a coal pit where they would open a window and just slide the coal in from the truck.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like heaped up real big. And so whenever we wanted to heat up the furnace, we had to go in there and get a bucket of coal and throw it in, you know. And our bathroom was downstairs too. And we had like a circle stairway up to the kitchen. But anyway.
So then you were 17 when you got married?
I was 17 when I got married. And Terry was born when I was 18. And let's see. Yeah, they were born 18. And then I got married to Ben in 1950. Terry was born in 48, wasn't quite a couple of years old. Oh, what I wanted to tell you, when my dad died, Philip was only 3 1/2. And we were at the funeral home, and 2 of Dad's best friends were standing there talking. And Philip looked at him, and he said, "Shh, my dad's sleeping," like that. Because we were standing right by the casket. But anyway, Mom worked up at the Allen Country Club until she went to work at the old Avenue there in Bellevue. And she was the first waitress they hired. And then the kids started coming after I married Ben.
What happened to your first husband?
He died. when he came, well, we got a divorce,
Yeah.
and he died in '88. And, but your dad and I were, or your grandpa and I were married in 1950.
So
in
when
January.
when you got divorced the first time, did you move away, or
Do what?
did you like move somewhere, or?
I lived with my grandmother after my dad died because Mom was afraid of all the boys hanging around the house. So that's how I met Ed, because his mom and dad owned this house that was a duplex, and Grandma had the apartment on one side, and they had the other side. And you talk about people biased against African Americans. That my uncle, I was in the car with him one day, and when a black man started to step off the curb, he said, "Come on, you black SOB." He said, "I'll run over you. Step off that curb." I said, "Uncle Dick, you know." He said, "I'll do it too." And then, when I was down there, the black people sat in the balcony. They had their, when I was in high school down there, you got, if you got a job in the afternoon, they called it diversified occupations, and you could take and get credit and go to work in the afternoon. So I got to go to work for Dr. Walter Johnson, who I found out was related to us, like second or third cousins. And it was his dad that delivered me. And so he and his brother had a clinic, and I worked there. But they had separate entrances for the black and white. They had separate operating rooms for the black and white. And the drinking fountains were all different.
And this was in Mississippi?
And the theater, the blacks sat up in the balcony and the whites sat down below. They had separate entrances into the theater. On the bus, they sat in the back of the bus. They were not allowed to sit in the front. And a lot of that, even though we've gotten past, a lot of it still goes on down there. People don't realize how biased they are down there.
And this is Mississippi? Is this Mississippi you're talking about?
What state?
What state?
Mississippi.
Yeah.
And then after Ed went to Okinawa, I came up here with Terry, and we corresponded. We just got married too young, you know, and he liked the girls, so.
And so once you divorced, then what did you do? I mean, did you get a job,
Well,
or?
I only knew Ben 6 weeks before I married him. So I was going with him in December, and Ed and I got divorced in January, and Ben and I got married. And so Judy was born in November, and then Sonny was born 2 years later. Well, Terry, I already had Terry. And then 2 years later was Bruce. So they're 48, 50, 52, and 54. Mm-hmm. And, but anyway, it was an interesting life. We moved out to California, Kentucky, and bought that house. It was half-built, and I was pregnant with Bruce. And walking across the kitchen floor, I fell right through the planks. The house was half-built. We had to put some of the shingles on it. We had to put the windows were in, but all the flooring wasn't in it. And we had the gas furnace, but it was in the floor. We didn't have any basement. And we had a well dug. And when people's water went dry, we supplied them with water from our well because it went really deep. But when I at that time I had, I bought from Dayton, where Ben and I lived, I bought my automatic washer and dryer. Where every time I used a washer, it ran the prime off the pump. So Ben come home, he had to take and get underneath that crawl space under the house and prime the pump. But anyway, we survived.
Now, didn't you tell me that when you and Ben started dating, that he didn't know that you had Terry,
He did not know, but
Yeah,
no.
so tell me that story. Weren't you in the car or something and you were talking and?
The reason I didn't tell him, I went on a date with this guy to the drive-in theater. And it was a fellow I went to school with when I was a sophomore in Dayton. And he got smart with me in the car. And I said, take me home. He didn't take the speaker off of the glass door or the window of the car, nothing. He got mad and just took off. And that cord stopped him. He got out and took the speaker and threw it on the ground. He still lived. And so anyway, he drove me home. And then I wouldn't date anybody. Ben was gone. We were having problems. Our letters, you know, wanted a divorce and all this when he got home. So I didn't date anybody again. And my friends, Betty and John Snyder, they knew Ben. Well, Ben used to service the typewriter machines where I worked at Interocean Insurance over in Cincinnati. And he serviced my typewriter and rode the bus home. And here to come find out, we only lived 2 blocks apart. And so I lived on 7th Street, and he lived down on, I think, 5th Street or 4th Street in Dayton there. And you could just walk down a couple blocks and there you were. So anyway, we started seeing each other. Well, in the meantime, he goes over to his friend and he tells him he's dating me. And Betty, John's wife, said, are you talking about Pat Higgins? And he said, yeah. He said, she has a little boy. He said, no, she don't. She would have said something. She said, yeah, she said, I think he's about 1.5, maybe 2 or something like that. So the next time we had a date, Ben asked me, he said, were you married before? And I wasn't going to lie to him. Why? I said, yeah. He said, do you have a little boy? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh. I said, does that bother you? And he said, no, not really. And so, like I said, we went together 6 weeks. And he had just broken up with a girl, too. And her name was Julie Laycock. I will never forget. He had all these jewelry bills where he'd bought her jewelry and everything. We had to pay those off after we got married. And so, anyway, we lived up there, let's see, in Dayton. I don't know, we lived with Mom for a while.
So did he ever say, why didn't you tell me, about your son? Did he ever question why you didn't tell him?
I told him, yeah, he did.
And what did you
I
say?
said I never told anybody that I only went out on one date, and I said he started getting fresh with me. And I said, and I told him I'd been married, and I had a little boy, and he didn't like that a bit. So after that, I said, I didn't tell anybody I had Terry. And I said, so when you asked me to go out, I didn't tell you because, I wanted to date you. So anyway.
So were you afraid that he wouldn't want to date you,
Yeah.
or were you afraid that he was going to want something more too quick?
Yeah, maybe. I didn't do this kind of thing, and I just felt like, if he didn't want me and my son, the heck with you, But he did. We dated, like I said, for 6 weeks. I met him over where I worked, and so that was that. We went down to the Justice of the Peace at the courthouse in Newport. Mom stood up for me, and Ralph, your dad's brother, stood up for him, and we got married there. We only had to pay a couple dollars for a license. Got married by the Justice of the Peace down here. My first marriage was by a minister, the First Baptist Church there in Starkville. So when I took, and Ben and I moved down across from Corpus Christi when Sonny was just a baby. And that church down there on Isabella Street, big Catholic church. And across the street is where the priest lived. Where our house, we just had a little backyard, and Terry used to go down there and play. And Terry wasn't in school yet, I guess, because he started the first grade up when we lived, when we moved up to Vine Street, I think. I don't know. I don't remember that exactly. He did. He started kindergarten when we lived up on Vine Street. So he must have been about 3 or 4 years. Sonny was just born, so he had to be 4 years old. Sonny was born when I lived there. And so he said, a lot of people back in those days would rent to you if you had children. And so one day, Ben wanted me to turn Catholic, see? And I said, sure, that's fine. But I had gone to the Baptist church all my life, participated in everything that went on. And that was my social life, going to church. And so anyway, I went over to talk to Father Croker, who was the priest there, and about joining a church. So he asked me about my marriages, and when I told him I was married by a Baptist minister, he said, you will have to go through all this stuff through the Pope. It'll take you a year to get that dissolved. And I told Ben, I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep my religion. Ben didn't go to church. And so I said, I go to church every Sunday. I dress those kids up, take them with me. And when we bought that house in Carthage, I still belong to the First Baptist Church here at 8th and York. And I dress those kids up every Sunday and take them to church down here. And I did that for about a year. And then I thought, I was just tired, you know. I'd drive down there and then bring them back. And so I joined the Church of Nazarene, which was up there on Washington Trace. And I took the kids every Sunday. We got involved with that church. And when Roy, Mom's second husband, was dying, Reverend Hamby, who I saw his name in the telephone book just the other day, he's still alive. And but anyway, he went over to the hospital. It's the one, wasn't St. E. It's the one down by the river over. And they turned it into like condos and stuff. But Roy was in that hospital, and Reverend Hamby went over, and Roy had cancer of the throat, and he sat with him for 8 hours, and until he came out of surgery and everything. He was so good. I mean, you know, and but anyway, he sat with Mom and Roy for all day while that surgery was going on, and then after the surgery. So he was really good. And then we moved up here on Terrace, and I started going to St. Paul's, and that's where I still am, you know. But
were you the first ones in that house, or was that?
Yeah.
So that house.
That
was
house
built?
has always been a Markus house.
Really?
Yeah. When we looked at those houses, we sold our house out in the country for $3,000.
Really? How much was that house?
We bought the house out there on Belt, $1,500, and we got $3,000 out of it. This house when we moved in was $14,400.
Really?
And it was actually $14,000 to begin with, but I wanted my stove in the wall and just a range over there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted a little bit more than some of the others, so they could charge me $400 more. And so when you were a baby, that was your home. You said one time, "This will always be my home. I'll never leave here." And you used to wear your grandpa's sweatshirt, or not sweat, t-shirts when you get ready to go to bed, and he'd be laying on the couch watching TV, and you'd crawl up in his lap, and that T-shirt come down to you, you know, it was like a night shirt. But anyway, it was.
So what about like the war? You said
Do what?
like when World War II broke out. Tell us about that.
Where were you living at the time?
When World War, that's what I was telling you. We were down in Isabella marching around the
Right.
table. My dad yelled at us to be quiet, and that's when they announced the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And my uncle, my mother's own, well, she had 3 brothers. One died in his 30s, and the one, James Melton, that's who Jim's named after, was on a submarine. And the submarine, he was okay. I still got his letters and everything. He was on the USS Herring. And so when I got his letters, he would always write to me because I was a kid, you know, and tell me. And he said, always said, I got wounded pretty bad, but don't say nothing to your grandma about it. I don't want her to know. So he eventually, they got hit, and they hit the surface, and the Japanese shot as they came up on the top, came up on the boat there, you know. And my other Uncle Jess, when we lived out in Carthage, he came to see us. He was an engineer on the Delta Queen. And every time the Delta Queen come in town, he'd come and see us and everything. And that was my mom's oldest brother, I think, yeah. And then there was Purser, who was the second, and then James Melton was the third. And I only met him once, and that's when Aunt Maud lived in Memphis. And Mom and I stayed with her. In fact, Mom, after she had Mike, and we had went up to Memphis to stay with Aunt Maud for a little while. We actually never had a home. We traveled all the time. Mom got that uremic poisoning where she swallowed water so bad and had to be in the house. I mean, in the hospital. And so we stayed. Jim and I stayed with Aunt Maud. Aunt Maud was married to a Fay Pledger then, and she's been married 3 times. So anyway, she was 98 the 12th of February, still going strong. She gets on that telephone, she's got that deep South accent. And, Pat, honey, she said, I got your, she said, wait a minute, I forgot what I was going to say. And I started talking to her about different things. She said, oh, I know what I was going to say. She said, I got your Christmas card with that picture of you in it, which is the one your mom's got you. Mm-hmm. And I had Bruce cut up off that part that says, loving mother, whatever, and he just made 5x7s. And I sent one to Aunt Maud and one to Darla, and I gave the third one, just had 3 I made. But anyway, I still got the other half where it says, loving mother, you know, and gave the year. But she said, she said, I wanted to tell you, I got that picture. She said, I can't believe you're that old. I was 80. And the picture was taken for the church directory, and it was taken in September, and I was 80 in November. And we didn't get the pictures. We got the pictures before Christmas, but we didn't get the directory, which is in the drawer, until like after Christmas, January or something. And anyway, she said, you know what? My whole family's here, because it was the day after her birthday. They all were there for her birthday, took her out, and then on her birthday, or the day after, when I called, which is the reason I waited till the day after. I figured she'd be home and by herself. And Debbie lives with her, my cousin, and she said, "Oh no," she said, "they're all here to drive me crazy." And all her grandchildren were there, and she had 3 girls. They were all there, and their husbands and so forth, you know. And I guess some of their cousins came up too, because I got a bunch of cousins that lived there in San Antonio. And Vicksburg, San Antonio was the 2 major spots in the South where they lived. And then I had some that lived over in Alabama, and they're still over there. So Alabama or Georgia, 1 or 2. But interesting life.
So how old were you when the war broke out?
How old was I?
Yeah.
I was 16.
So you were old enough to know what was going on then, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
I used to see those news things and everything, and then they told stories about how they took all the old people and took them to the gas chamber because they couldn't produce children. The Germans did.
Yeah.
And then how they shot cement with the injector of it to the vaginal of some of those horrible, horrible
Yeah.
stories. And the Japanese, I think Uncle Jim sent me a picture, or else he told me about how they chopped their heads off right in the middle of the street, anybody that betrayed them. And it was bad.
Pretty horrific time, huh?
It was a bad time. I mean, the war we're going through now has lasted longer than the Second War. We haven't lost as many. We lost thousands in the Second War. But we've lost enough, and this has been going on long enough. But anyway, it's been a busy, long life. My dad died in '46, and Mom and my girlfriend Hazel, who lived 2 doors up, and we rode a bicycle all the way out Dayton Pike to Fort Thomas, all the way to Alexandria and back one day.
Jeez.
My mom was young. She was young. And we climbed up on the water tower there. I swear I don't know how we did all that stuff. But she went with us. So Hazel and I were about the same age. She's still alive. She lives up in Dayton still. Jim tells me he keeps up with all that. So one day he went up there. He always took and would go up every week or at least once a month. And he would walk the flood wall because they got you know where that is. And he went down Dayton Pike one day into 8th Street where we lived on 8th, right where Dayton Pike turns into that. And they had leveled our old house. There was nothing there. He ran to the phone and called me. He's, "Pat, they've tore down our home." And I said, who did it? He said, it didn't matter to me. I hadn't seen it for years. And it was just a little shotgun house with a little room added on the side of the little house. And when Mom had Philip, Debbie, the last one, she was standing at the kitchen sink. Mike was still there, and Jim. The boys were still home, they weren't married. And so Mom was standing at the kitchen sink doing dishes. And she said, "Mike," she said, "my water broke." And when she was with Debbie, pregnant with Debbie. And he said, "Well, wait a minute, I gotta go down to the basement and get some tools." He said, turn the faucet off." She said, "It wasn't that water," she said. "I'm about to have your," they didn't know what sex then. Said, "The baby's about to be born." Well, then he took her right down to Spears Hospital, And she told that story over and over. I never will forget that. And then there was one other couple that lived next door, bought that first house, and Mom bought it. And Ben was the one that suggested she move out there. sell her house there in Dayton and move out there. And they argued so much. Every time he came to me and said, your mom did this, your mom did that, I said, who asked her to move next door? It's like that. And but anyway, she loved him dearly, just like a son. And when he died, she just went into hysterics right there at the cemetery.
Who's that?
And
Who are you talking about?
huh?
Her mom.
Oh, okay.
But she just cried and cried. She couldn't get over it. And Judy, well, when Ben died, Tammy was 11 years old and she was in the apartment. And so was Bruce's two little ones. Ryan was about 3 and Melinda was about 5. There's 2 years. There's a year, actually 15 months difference in their age.
All 3 of them were there?
All 3 of them were sitting on the sofa, and he keeled over, and the phone rang, and Mom had a scanner, and she heard that on the scanner, and she's Pat. She said, is it Ben? I said, yeah. I said, I'll talk to you later, and I hung up. Well, we had called 911, and so they came out, and where we lived at Hidden Valley, if you go around the circle there, that's all level, so they backed the ambulance up to our apartment because we lived on the ground floor. And Bruce and Georgianne lived on the 3rd floor, our old apartment where we used to live. And so we were getting ready to grill hot dogs and stuff out in the yard. And I came in the door, the sliding glass door. I was sitting outside, and I actually had been ironing. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and I was sweating. It was in August, and I was so tired. And he yelled for me. He said, Pat. I said, what do you want now? And I was sitting out, like I said, outside with the 3 kids. And he said, come here. And I walked in, and he was sitting in a chair, one of those chairs right there, and he just slumped over like that. And we had twin, these kind of chairs. The kitchen door was here, and then I had a chair here, one of these kind of, the matching one on the other side of the hallway, and a lamp and a stand in between. And our dining room table was right in front of the window with the 2 chairs. As I walked in, he keeled over on the floor, and his very last words to me was, I grabbed his arm trying to help him up the chair. He says, let go of me, don't touch me, I'm not dead yet. And with that he keeled over.
Oh, jeez.
Well, the squad came, and the neighbors came and got the kids and took them out, and they worked on him with the paddles. And then I rode down in the car with Mary Gosling, and he was gone. You know, they worked on him for a while, and this one lady who was the assistant, she would go in and check, and her name was Marge. She married a doctor who used to be up here in Alexandria, and then Hildebrand or something like that. And she belonged to the Elks, and she had remarried twice since her husband died. But anyway, I forgot. You just block everything out, you know. And 3 years later, I was coming out of EJ's, and she was going in, and I recognized her then. And I said, I know you. And she said, yeah, I was the assistant on you when your husband died. I said, Marge, and then she told me her last name. But, you know, those things happen. He had, in July, I was sitting out, it was dark, and I was sitting out on the patio there, and see, the swimming pool was right there behind us. We could see the lights on, the kids swimming, and I was just sitting out there to cool off. And he came out. He kissed me on the cheek. He said, you need anything from the store? And I said, the store? I said, no. I said, where are you going to the store? He said, I'm just going to run across the street. I said, oh, you must be out of cigarettes. He said, yeah. So he knew I wouldn't buy them. And so anyway, he went over there, and that was in July, and he died in August. And he was a straight-laced man, but he was funny too.
Oh, yeah, very dry sense of humor too.
And the smoke, the nicotine from his body was so strong. He smoked 5 packs a day.
5?
5. That's 100 cigarettes. He would have almost a whole pack smoked because he got up at 5:30 in the morning before I ever got up at 7:30. And he, you know, it was just one right after the other. So, but he had been in the hospital May of that year, and same day, May 5th or 6th, the year before. And the doctor told him he had to quit smoking. He tried, he really did, but he just couldn't. And but like I said, he was in the hospital that year in May, and the year before in May, same day, and then he died in August. So, but it was.
I was supposed to be there that night. I chose to spend the night with Tony Markus instead, because Mom and Dad were at a concert, right? Beach Boys concert.
They were over at the Reds game with Terry and Terry Biddle and his wife, and then Sonny was out at the rifle range, I think, there on Rifle Range Road, the hunting club.
Yeah.
And then I forget where Terry was, but Debbie got hold of all of them. She called over to the stadium, and they paged Judy and Denny.
Yeah.
And she got them all down to the hospital. And Sonny, he was standing over by the window, and they came in, and the doctor did, and said, you know, he passed away. And Sonny just was standing, he just went down against the wall just like that. I guess he came so close to fainting, he just sat, you know, and everybody was crying. And Terry was kneeling before me. He says, Mom, please, he said, please don't open the casket. He said, I want to remember Dad the way he was. And he was just sobbing. They all were, and well, I was too. But a lot of things happen to you, and they happen for a reason, you know. But I thought at one time I was going to get married again to Dale. We'd gone together 4.5 years. Well, in May of '95, I always went to a retreat in May out in St. Louis, and a couple of my friends, one from Cincinnati, and well, both of them were from Cincinnati. We always drove out together, and I would always do the driving. So the day that we had to leave was always commencement day down at the university, and I worked commencement from about 7:30 till about 5:30. So we'd only drive like halfway, and then we'd stop for the night and then go in the next day on a Saturday. And so you were out there a week. On Thursday you went to the chapel and you wrote letters to God to say what you would want to happen that year and what your wishes were and your problems and all that stuff. And what they did, they sent a letter back to you in October. So I was talking about you two and Tammy and Amy all got married that year. And I said, I want the best marriage for them, you know. And I said, and another thing I wanted to ask you is, Dale, my friend, wants to get married. And I said, I don't know if I ever want to marry again. And so I said, I need an answer from you to tell me. I still got the letter. And I said, I need an answer from you to tell me what to do. And Dale died July 5th. That was the answer of me never to get married again. So I've had 3 people ask me, and I can't do it. And I know, I just can't, you know. 2 of them went bad, both of them died. Terry's biological father, he died the last Saturday in April of '88. And Jerry, Mom's youngest sister, died a week later in '88. She smoked, had emphysema, had this, just like Ben. Ben had emphysema and a heart attack. So anyway, when I was down in Vicksburg about 4 years ago with my Helen, we made like a 10-day trip. She had never been any place but to Florida. And so we went to Nashville, and then we went over to Memphis. And it was like a 5-hour drive in between each one. And then we went down to Vicksburg. I went to the shore of the city park. Well, while I was there, I called Ed's friend, Rogers, and I said, Rogers, and I told him who it was. And I said, I cannot remember where the cemetery is in Vicksburg. I said, and I told him where I was staying and everything. And I asked him about his wife, Beth, and he said, oh, Patty said Beth died quite a few years ago from cancer. He said, I've remarried. And I said, oh. And so he said, the cemetery is out on Oneonta, which was outside the city of Vicksburg, out in the country like. And he said, your aunt, Jerry, is like 5 graves over from Ed. She's buried out there too. Well, she had lived out there. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, a week apart, and they were there. And the funny part, when I took Helen to see the national park down there, like I said, it's gorgeous. And we went, they had raised an old gunboat made of wood from the Mississippi River. And we went to see that. And they had some of the original plates and tins of food and stuff in there. And so I went over to the office, and they asked where my cousin was buried, Uncle Jess's son. And they showed me. And I went over to his grave, and I've got pictures of all this stuff. And I looked over like 5 graves over, gravesites. There was this like white monument, and it had Asbury Turner written on it. Asbury is such an unusual name for a man. I said, Helen, that man, he must be related to somebody that goes to my church. I said, I go to church with Asbury Turner. Very good friends with him. And when I got back, I went right for him and asked him if he had ever been to Vicksburg or had family lived down there. And he said no. And I told him about this monument being, it's like, I could sit, I stood, knelt here by my cousin's monument, and I looked straight over here, and this white monument, they stood about this tall, and it said Asbury Turner. Well, I almost went into cardio. I thought, my goodness, you know, that's so unusual. But this cemetery, I think I've told you about this. The one big thing was, what was his name? The Union general. Yeah, his home is still down there. I'll think about it in a minute. And then there's a place there that has like 15 or 20 cannons, and you can stand right here at the end and look all the way down that row. Not one of them's out of the line. You look like you're looking at one, and they're out. And the Illinois monument is like the dome of the Capitol. You have to go up all these steps. And inside there's a bronze plaque and different famous people. And it's all hollow, you know, inside. And there's like 3 or 4 entrances to it. It's huge. In Texas, Mississippi, all the states have one. And there's different corporals, captains, generals buried all through there, you know. And they used to have 3 observation towers because it sits up on a hill overlooking the Mississippi River. And they would have 3 observation towers where you could look out all over the park and everything. It's a big park. And but there was a tornado went through there in '52 and destroyed those. And but anyway, a lot of history, a lot of things.
Now, at what point in your life did you start working?
We got 1 minute left.
When I started working, I was in a junior in high school. That's when I started working for the doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And I got 2 credits. I didn't have to go to school in the afternoon. I got 2 credits for doing that. And then I worked at, when Terry was a baby, I worked for the insurance company. And then when I married Ben, I didn't work anymore until after the kids were in school. And then I started working up here at the elementary school in Alexandria, and I worked there until, I guess I worked there 2 or 3 years. I was working there when Kennedy died, was killed, assassinated, because one of the teachers brought his class into the library, and I was always in there to help him with books. And he said, turn the TV on. He said, Kennedy was just assassinated. And so we turned it on and watched, and he was crying, I was crying, you know. And so, anyway, from there, I stayed there, I think, 4 or 5 years, because Sonny was playing basketball, and I used to go, I kept score, and I'd go with the team everywhere. And then the nurse there, was it the nurse? No, this one, the guy said, I know of a job that you can get down at the nursing home. No, it was the nurse. Irene Weinel worked down there. The one we rented a house from out here on Pine Creek. She was a nurse down there at Lakeside. And she said, Pat, she said, you can get a job down there, because they didn't want one anymore, you know, they're at school. And I worked